The child is born silent, and since it carries the spirit of misfortune, it must be taken to the forest before dawn. The chief midwife ordered, while the woman cry in pain laying on a mat. Her cry is not because of labor pains, but because she just lost her child, a child she has been carrying inside her for 9 months. Counting days until she holds her child in her arms, and now her baby is gone. In the far eastern stretch of Nigeria, where the land curved into deep valleys and the sun often hid behind thick crowns of iroko and udala trees, there stood a village called Umu-Oyi. To strangers, Umu-Oyi seemed peaceful. Smoke from cooking fires rose lazily into the sky each morning. Children sometimes laughed while playing by the river. Women clapped rhythmically as they pounded yam in wooden mortars, their songs floating gently into the wind. Chickens wandered freely between compounds, and goats slept beneath carved stools and drying mats. But beneath this ordinary calm lived a fear so old, so deep, that no one could remember where it had first begun. It was the fear of stillborn children. Generations ago, a great sickness had swept through the land. Pregnant women lost their babies. Some wives died on the mats where they labored. Crops wilted. Rivers dried. Animals stopped giving birth. And the elders, desperate for an explanation, claimed that the spirits were angry. When at last a powerful diviner was summoned from distant lands, he had made a terrifying declaration. Any child born silent carries the spirit of misfortune. If buried in the land of the living, such a child will poison the soil, the harvest, and the wombs of your women. Such children must not be buried. They must be returned to the bush where wandering spirits take what belongs to them. Fear rooted that law into the bones of Umu-Oyi. From that day on, any baby born without a cry was taken into the forest and abandoned. No burial. No wrapper. Not even a prayer. The women of Umu-Oyi learned to hide their tears. The men learned to harden their hearts. And the bush, silent and patient, received the babies like offerings to the unknown. Over the years, the ritual became normal. Cruelty, when repeated long enough, becomes tradition. Yet not everyone's heart grew as stone. Among the women of Umu-Oyi lived Ngozi, a soft-spoken woman with sad eyes and hands that trembled often. She was not known for loudness or laughter. She was known for patience, the kind that bore pain quietly and carried grief deep inside. Ngozi had been married young, but she had already miscarried 2 pregnancies at the early stage of her marriage. Her sorrow, however, did not keep children away from her womb. Her first pregnancy brought hope. But when the day came, the baby arrived without breath. She remembered the weight of that tiny body, the silence that rang louder than a drum, the midwives' cold, efficient voices. Prepare him for the forest before the sun sets. She had screamed that day until her voice broke. The second time, she did not even cry. The third pregnancy came like an uninvited guest, unwanted by fear, yet pulled in by quiet desire. She begged the spirits at the river bank. She placed offerings at the foot of the old baobab tree. She slept with protective herbs under her mat. Just one child, she whispered into the darkness each night. One living child. But the gods of Umu-Oyi had already written her name in sorrow. And when the night of the birth finally came, thunder growled across the sky as if the heavens themselves were in pain. The wind was restless. The moon had hidden her face. Even the dogs of the village refused to bark. Ngozi labored alone in her hut, blood and sweat mixing beneath her body while her fingernails carved crescent moons into the dirt floor. She dared not scream, for she knew if the birth brought death again, the women would come with their cold eyes. Hours blurred together. Her vision dimmed and returned. Then, silence fell like an iron blanket. A baby boy lay in her hands. Still. Cold. Not even a tremble in his small chest. No, she breathed, her voice broken like dry wood. She pressed a trembling finger to his nose. His lips. His heart. Nothing. She pressed him to her bare chest, rocking slowly. Breathe for me, even once. But the universe answered with stillness. At the first light of dawn, footsteps approached and the midwives entered. One glance was enough. It is done again, one of them muttered. Ngozi turned her back to them, curling around the small body. Please, wait, she pleaded faintly. But tradition had no ears. They pulled the child from her grip. And in that moment, a wild thought struck her mind, sudden, sharp, burning like lightning. She looked at his tiny palm. With a nearby thorn, she carved a small crescent moon into the baby's skin, just enough to leave a mark that would never go away. A part of her. A message to the world. A silent rebellion. If you ever walk this world again, she whispered, tears dripping onto his face, this is how I will recognize you. Then he was taken, wrapped in nothing, carried like waste, and swallowed by the forest. The same forest that had devoured so many others. Ngozi lay empty, her breast full, her arms hollow, her world shattered. She did not know that fate had refused to obey Umu-Oyi that day. Far from Umu-Oyi, on the other side of the forest maze, lived a man the world had not rejected. His name was Dinta, a healer, a wanderer, a listener of the invisible. People from many villages called him a madman. Others called him a holy one. Only the forest knew who he truly was. Dinta had lived most of his life among leaves instead of people. He knew the secrets hidden in roots, the language of birds, and the warnings carried by the wind. On the day Ngozi's son was thrown away, Dinta had been walking deep into the untouched belly of the forest. He was searching for a rare root said to glow faintly when madness approached a village. The roots had not been seen in years, and Dinta felt urgency stir in his bones. Then he heard it. A sound that did not belong. A sound too fragile for the wilderness. A baby's cry. Dinta froze. In that forest, nothing cried without purpose. No woman would leave her child here, he muttered, parting twisted vines. Unless forced by fear. He followed the thin sound until he saw a small body lying on damp leaves, ants already approaching his tiny feet. But the baby kicked weakly. Alive. Dinter's eyes widened, a mix of horror and awe. He was named dead, but the earth refuses him. Kneeling, he carefully lifted the boy. Warmth pulsed faintly through the fragile chest. Then his eyes caught the strange crescent mark on the baby's tiny palm. The healer inhaled sharply. This is no accident. A mother's hand defied death. Dinter wrapped the boy in his flowing robe and pressed him to his chest. You shall be mine to guide, he whispered. And your fate shall be greater than their cruelty. He named him Chidubem, God is guiding me. From that day forward, the forest that had once been his home became Chidubem's first cradle. The forest did not welcome everyone the same way. Some entered and were swallowed whole, consumed by tangled thorns, venomous insects, and the unseen eyes that watched from the branches above. Some lost their way and never returned, their names eventually reduced to whispers told over fires on cold nights. But to Chidubem, the forest opened its arms. From the first day Dinter carried him through the green corridors of twisted roots and hanging vines, something around the boy seemed to soften the wilderness. When the healer entered his small hut woven from reeds and mud, birds began making nests on the nearby branches. Insects crawled more gently. Even the lizards that skittered across the rough walls seemed less frightened. Dinter noticed these things, though he never spoke them out loud. This child, he often thought as he watched the baby sleep, has already made peace with the earth. For the first few weeks, Chidubem was quiet and fragile. He clung to the old healer's finger more than anything else, his tiny hands tightening and loosening as if squeezing the uncertainty out of the world. Though they had no blood connection, a bond as deep as ancestry grew between them. Dinter fed him with a mixture of softened tubers, goat's milk, and herbs that strengthened weak lungs and bones. He sang to him in the language of the forests, low, humming songs passed down from healers long gone. At night, he placed protective charms above the boy's head, not because he feared danger, but because he felt fate watching. And slowly, the boy grew stronger. By the time Chidubem was 2 years old, he could wander barefoot over ground that made other children cry. Thorns never seemed to pierce his skin. Ants trekked across his arms without biting. Once, a snake slithered up to him, circled his tiny legs, then vanished into the undergrowth without threatening. Dinter knelt beside him that day, touched his forehead, and whispered, "You are not just living in the world. The world recognizes you." While other children learned to farm, hunt, and obey the rhythms of village life, Chidubem learned the secrets of life and death. Dinter began his training early. Each morning, before the first streak of sunlight pierced the roof, they walked together through damp earth to search for herbs. "This leaf," Dinter said one day, placing a small green plant in the boy's palm, "heals the lungs when the breath becomes weak." He pointed to a red-stemmed root. "And this one can bring down a fever high enough to steal a child's mind." He showed him barks that stopped bleeding, berries that cleansed poisons, vines used to ease birthing pains, and stems capable of easing spirits troubled by loss. But more than that, Dinter taught him something most healers never mastered. He taught him to listen. "Do not rush the forest," he warned. "It speaks slowly to those who rush, but speaks deeply to those who wait." So Chidubem learned to sit still for hours, his back pressed against ancient tree trunks, eyes half closed, breath steady. He listened to the wind sliding between leaves, to the twigs snapping beneath tiny feet, to the humming of the earth beneath the soil. With time, those sounds became words in their own way. They guided him where to step, which herbs to harvest, and sometimes, who was coming. By the time Chidubem turned 10, he could sense approaching illness before the village even noticed. He could feel death drifting on the wind and healing rising in rain. Whenever Dinter fell ill, it was the boy who brewed the correct mixture, pressed the right leaves to his skin, and brought him back from the edge of shadow. "You have surpassed me," the old healer said often. "My hands are now your shadows." Yet even as he grew in knowledge and power, Chidubem carried a silent ache deep in his heart. He did not fully belong to the forest, and yet he did not fully belong to humans either. Sometimes, from a distance, he watched village children play by the river bank, their laughter echoing like freedom. He saw mothers washing clothes as their sons clung to their wrappers. He saw fathers lift their children onto tired shoulders. A strange, hollow feeling would rise inside him, a question he could not shape into words. "Where do I come from?" When he once asked Dinter about his mother, the old man's eyes grew distant. "She loved you enough to mark you," Dinter replied, showing him the crescent scar on his palm. "That is all some children ever receive." "But was she cruel?" "No," he said firmly. "The world was cruel around her. She was only trapped inside it." From that day on, Chidubem would run his finger across the curved scar on his palm whenever the weight inside him grew too heavy. Somehow, it comforted him even though he did not yet understand why. As the years stretched into manhood, Chidubem's power no longer hid itself. People began hearing about the young healer in the forest, the boy who could cure what others could not. They came in secret at first. A woman whose baby burned with fever. An old man with lungs crushed by years of smoke. A warrior whose leg had been shattered in battle. No matter who came, Chidubem knelt before them with gentleness. He did not see rank or wealth, only pain and the thread of life he could tug gently back into place. With every life he saved, his name traveled farther. Until one day, as he ground healing roots beside a stream, he heard a stranger speaking. "There is a village not far from here," the man told Dinter, "called Umu-Oyi. Their women suffer. Infants sometimes die without reason. Their men grow bitter. Something about their land is cursed." At the sound of that name, something in Chidubem stirred violently, like an old drum struck again after years of silence. Umu-Oyi. He did not know why the name clung to him like smoke. "I will go there," he said suddenly. Dinter was silent for a long moment, thinking if he should permit him to go there or not. After a while Dinta said, "Your past may live in that land," he warned. "Some answers leave scars." "I already carry a scar," Chidubem replied, gazing at the crescent on his palm. "Perhaps it is time I learn why." 2 days later, with a bag of herbs on his back and fire in his spirit, he began the path toward the village that had once thrown him away. Umu-Oyi had changed little since the day it had rejected him. The same dust roads, the same cracked clay houses, the same spirit of hidden fear clinging to the air. But Chidubem did not recognize anything. He walked through the village with the calm confidence of a healer and the quiet curiosity of a stranger. Villagers stared at him, at his strong posture, his serene face, the oddly familiar crescent-shaped mark on his hand. "He does not look like one of us," someone whispered. "But he walks like he owns the ground," another replied. Word of his arrival spread quickly. "The young healer has come," they murmured. "He is said to command the language of leaves." The village welcomed him and offered him a place to stay. A simple hut near the village ruler's compound, where the village ruler normally welcomed visitors. Before 3 days, people started coming to him to seek for solution to their sickness. They brought both their young and old, women looking for children and those whose children are unwell. One day Chidubem decided to walk around the village. And then, she appeared. Her name was Amaka. She stood at the well, filling a clay pot with water. When she lifted her gaze and their eyes met, the world seemed to pause. Something strange washed over them both, a warm recognition that neither could explain. For Chidubem, her face felt tied to an unspoken memory. Her laughter, when it finally appeared, tugged at him like a forgotten song. And for Amaka, his presence felt like familiar comfort disguised as novelty. "You are the healer?" she asked, her voice as soft as slow rain. "I try to be," he smiled. "People say you can fix what is already dead. I can only help what still desires life." A silence sat between them. A smile followed. And in that little moment beside the well, fate shifted again. Days turned into weeks. Chidubem healed broken bodies and tired souls. The village praised him. The elders bowed their heads when he spoke. Mothers reached out for him as if he were a blessing wearing flesh. But it was Amaka who stole the spaces between his thoughts. She often brought him food when he worked late into the night. They spoke of dreams, of distant lands, of fears that only felt safe enough to reveal in the presence of the other. He watched her braid her hair by the river and felt a warmth bloom inside his chest. She watched him grind herbs, his strong hands moving with gentle precision, and felt her heart answer his presence before her mind could object. Neither of them knew the truth. Only Ngozi watched from a distance, her chest heavy with unexplainable unease. There was something about the boy's eyes, his silence, his gift, and many other things she can't see or explain. Memories she had buried beneath years of sorrow began to claw their way back to the surface. One evening, as the villagers began celebrating the rumored coming marriage between Amaka and the healer, Ngozi decided to bring blessed water to his hut. As he raised his hand over the bowl, the firelight flickered across his palm. The crescent mark revealed itself clearly. Ngozi froze. The world spun. Her heart shattered and healed all at once in a single breath. "That mark," she whispered. "It is mine." Chijubem asked, "Yours? What do you mean?" "Never mind," she responded. Umu-Oyi had not known celebration in a long time. 4 years, the village had lived beneath a cloud of quiet dread, lost children, silent births, bitter men, and women who once sang now resting their faces in their palms. But the arrival of Chijubem had turned despair to hope, and hope had bloomed into excitement when it became clear who had captured his heart. Amaka. She was one of the fairest daughters of the land. Gentle in speech, kind in spirit, hard-working and respected. If anyone in Umu-Oyi deserved happiness, the villagers agreed it was Amaka. And so, the announcement of her coming marriage to the young healer spread like festival fire. Drums were pulled from storage. Bright fabrics were unrolled. Palm wine was tapped early. Goats were marked for slaughter. "What a blessed union," the elders proclaimed. "The healer has chosen one of our own." Yet while the village danced in anticipation, one woman staggered in silence beneath the weight of the truth. Ngozi. Sleep abandoned her. Food turned to dust in her mouth. Her mind replayed the image of the crescent mark on Chijubem's palm again and again, as if carved into the inside of her eyes. She had marked her dead son with that very sign so that, should she meet him in another life, she would know him. And now he stood in the center of the village she lived in, not dead, but living, breathing, strong, and planning to marry her daughter. Her other child. Amaka. Ngozi wept into the earth night after night. "How could the spirits be so cruel?" she whispered, fists buried in the soil. "After everything, why return him to me this way?" But even in her agony, she knew the spirits were not cruel. It was Umu-Oyi that had been. In all this, Ngozi was still not sure if Chijubem was the son the village threw in the forest years ago, so that stopped her from saying anything. The morning of the wedding dawned coated in gold. The sun rose like a blessing, washing the village in warm light. Women tied bright wrappers around their waists and adorned their necks with beads. They decorated the paths with palm leaves and white chalk symbols for blessing. Young boys raced around the compound, practicing drumbeats. Girls braided Amaka's hair, humming songs about love and destiny. Amaka sat in her small hut, her heart racing, cheeks warm with excitement. "I used to think I would marry a farmer," she laughed shyly. "But the spirits sent me a healer." Her friends giggled. "He is handsome like a prince," one said. "And polite like an elder," another added. None of them saw the shadow that had fallen across Ngozi's doorway as she approached. "Amaka," Ngozi whispered, stepping inside. "Yes, Mama. You are not dressed for the occasion." Ngozi studied her daughter's face. So familiar. So full of innocence. She said to herself, if what she is thinking happened to be true, then how could she allow her to step into the most terrible mistake of all? She asked her friends to excuse them. She then turned to Amaka and said, "You must not marry him." The words fell from her lips like shattered glass. The room fell silent. "What?" Amaka's voice trembled. "Mama, what are you saying? Why?" Ngozi tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but the truth was too large for the moment. The faces around them stared in confusion. "You do not understand," she said, voice breaking. "There is a curse older than joy in this village, and this marriage will awaken it." Amaka's heart dropped. "Is this because he is not from Umu-Oyi?" she asked desperately. "Because he lives in the forest?" "Mama, he has done nothing but heal and help." "But that is the problem," Ngozi cried suddenly. "He is from here. From my blood. From my womb." The air froze. "What?" "He was mine before he was yours to love." The room erupted. Confusion. Panic. Disbelief. "He is your brother." The words fell on Amaka like stones. The world tilted. Her vision blurred. "No, no," she whispered, stumbling backward. "That is impossible." But Ngozi was already weeping, crumbling under her own truth. "I gave birth to a dead boy before you were born. The elders forced me to throw him into the bush. Before they took him, I carved a mark on his hand. A crescent moon. That same mark is upon the hand of Chijubem." A heavy silence echoed beyond the hut walls. Slowly, Amaka turned her trembling gaze to the door of the hut, where Chijubem now stood. He had heard everything. The earth beneath Chijubem seemed to split open. He stared at his hand. At the mark. At Ngozi. At Amaka. "It is not possible," he breathed. Ngozi stepped forward slowly, reaching out with a trembling hand, placing it upon his cheek. "Even though I had doubted myself at first, I know the scent of my own blood," she whispered. "Even the forest could not erase you from me." Chijubem dropped to his knees. Memories surged through him. The moment Dinta found him. His unanswered longing. His dreams filled with a woman's crying voice. Suddenly, everything made sense. He did not belong to the forest. He belonged to a mother who had never wanted to let him go. He belonged to a sister whose soul he had almost bound to his in ignorance. Tears spilled down his face. "I came here to heal your people," he said hoarsely. "I did not know I had come to heal myself, or to break you apart." Amaka fled the hut in tears. The villagers, gathered outside, looked upon the scene with wide, horrified eyes. Whispers turned to gasps. Gasps turned to mourning. And finally, the elders stepped forward, realization dawning like shameful light upon their old faces. "It was our law," one of them murmured. "Our cursed, cowardly law." The village square was silent in a way it had never known. No laughter. No drums. No chatter. Only the sound of truth settling into the bones of Umu-Oyi. The elders sat beneath the great iroko tree, their heads bowed. Dinta stood beside Chijubem now, his once young apprentice transformed into a living symbol of survival. "We believed we were protecting our land," the eldest continued, his voice thin as old paper, "but in our fear, we became the very rot we tried to stop." A heavy silence fell over the circle. Women held their children to their chests. Men who had once carried silent babies into the bush stared at their hands as if seeing blood that would never wash off. The wind lifted a few dry leaves and dropped them again, like the forest itself exhaling. "We turned grief into custom," another elder said bitterly. "We allowed a stranger's words to become our God." Chijubem stood in the center of them all, no longer just the healer, no longer the stranger, no longer the boy the forest had raised. He stood as the voice the earth had returned. "Look at me," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried the strength of thunder held back for too long. "You called me dead before I had the chance to breathe. You gave me to the bush as if I were rot. Yet I lived. Not because of your laws, but despite them." Eyes dropped. "I am not the only one," he continued. "How many others have you fed to fear? How many spirits still wander the trees around this village, waiting for a justice that never came?" Ngozi was weeping openly now, her body shaking. Dinta placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "That day," Chijubem said gently to her, "you thought you were losing a child. But you gave me something stronger than breath." She lifted her eyes to him. "You gave me a reason to return." The crowd murmured in confusion. "Return?" someone asked. "Yes," he said, raising the marked palm so all could see. "Not to punish you with sickness. Not to bring you famine. But to teach you what you buried, mercy." A low cry rose from among the women. "What do we do now?" one of them asked. "We cannot bring them back." "No," Chijubem agreed, pain flickering across his face. "But we can stop creating new ghosts." He turned to the elders. "From this day forward, no child is taken to the forest because it does not cry. No body is thrown away because it aches in silence. The land was never poisoned by stillness, it was poisoned by fear." The oldest man nodded slowly. "And the curse," he whispered. "It was never on the children," Chijubem replied. "It was on your belief." A trembling agreement moved through the village like ripples across water. Then let this law die today, the elder said as he lifted his staff. Let it be buried like a snake we have finally crushed. And for the first time in generations, Umu-Oyi heard a sound it had long forgotten. Relief. Not celebration. Not joy. But release. For 3 days, the village held a cleansing ceremony not for the spirits, but for themselves. They gathered beside the thin line where forest met earth. They dug a long trench, not to bury bodies that were long gone, but to bury the memory of their cruelty. Into the hole they placed the old charms, the bones of animals once used for sacrifice, the diviner's cracked staff that had spoken fear into their hearts. Ngozi was asked to speak. At first, she could not. Her voice lay buried beneath a mountain of years. But when Chijubem stepped beside her, holding her hand the way a son should, her words found breath. I am not the only mother who cried, she said softly. But today I am the only one who saw what my cries became. She looked around the village. My son did not die in the forest. He was reborn by its kindness. If there is a lesson, let it be this. What we throw away may return as our greatest blessing. Slowly, the people lowered their heads. The earth covered the pit. Palm wine was poured onto the soil not to please spirits, but to mark a new beginning. And when it was done, Chijubem felt a strange lightness in his chest. The forest behind them rustled approvingly. Amaka did not come out of her hut for many days. Shame sat heavy on her shoulders, not of sin, but of confusion. Love does not untangle itself simply because truth arrives. Her heart still recognized Chijubem before her mind remembered they were flesh. When she finally stepped outside, he was already there, sitting by the same well where they had first spoken. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I was not planning to be here long, he answered softly. She did not look at him. I do not know how to forget you. You may not need to, he said. Just change the shape of the memory. Her eyes lifted then, glistening. What shape? The shape of a brother, he whispered. A long silence passed between them, heavy but gentle now. Then at last, she nodded, resting her forehead against his shoulder just once, briefly, as a sister might. Thank you, for saving the village that hurt you. I did not save it, he replied. You all saved yourselves. I only reminded you how. Their love changed shape from desire to protection, from attraction to respect. And in an ironic twist of destiny, it was Amaka who later helped mothers deliver living babies. Guided by Chijubem's knowledge, he taught her and other young people in the village simple and basic herbs. The village that once threw children away became a place where life was guarded fiercely. Ngozi, once a woman of silent sorrow, became known as the mother of second chances. And Chijubem, the boy once left for death, now a chief healer who people come from far places to seek treatment from, a man whose very existence was proof that life refuses to be silenced. Dinter knew the time had come. You have given them back their sight, he told Chidubem at dawn. They no longer need mine or yours. Then where do I go? The young healer asked. Dinter smiled gently. Where the forest leads. It raised you for more than one broken village. Ngozi packed food for his journey with trembling hands. This time, she did not beg him to stay. This time, she understood love sometimes means letting the path grow. She pressed her forehead to his. Even if I lost your first breath, she whispered, let me keep your last memory in this place. You will never lose me again, he replied. Then he stepped from the soil that had once rejected him and walked toward the trees that had once saved him. But this time, he did not walk as a discarded child. He walked as a guardian of life. Years later, travelers would speak in distant lands of a healer with a crescent mark on his palm. They said forests calmed when he entered. They said dying children sometimes opened their eyes again when he sang. They said when barren lands needed mercy, he walked across them barefoot and left green behind him. And back in Umu-Oyi, when babies were born and their first cry filled the night air, mothers would weep not in fear, but in gratitude. For they finally understood. Silence was never a curse, only a voice waiting to be heard. Thank you for watching. Please share and subscribe for more stories.